So the first thing you have to do is to prepare all the materials needed for the tissue processing. When you have all your materials, you next need is to choose a tissue sample. So in this procedure, we have a uterus from a human. So after you have chosen your tissue sample, you need to proceed for a gross examination. So in the gross examination, it includes the tissue size, the length, the width, and the height, also its consistency, its color, and its texture. So when you're done doing the gross examination, you have to get a tissue cassette. So in a tissue cassette, it is where you put your tissue. So your tissue size is just enough to fit in the tissue cassette. So when you're done putting your tissue inside the tissue cassette, all you have to do is to label the tissue cassette. We call that as accessioning. So when you're done doing all those things prior to fixation, next is to proceed in the real fixing process. So the first thing you have to do is to submerge your tissue sample together with the tissue cassette in a 10% formalin for about 12 hours. And then after 12 hours, the tissue must undergo again for a gross examination to check for the changes. So you have recorded all those changes during the fixation process. Next you have to do is to dehydrate it. So as the name implies, dehydration. So the water intra and its extracellular will be removed. So after that, again, you have to submerge it again to 70% alcohol for about 3 hours, and next 95% of alcohol for about 3 hours, and 100% of alcohol 3 times with 3 hours interval. So after the hydration process, you need to undergo clearing. So in clearing, it removes the dehydrating agent. So in the clearing process, you have 2 kinds of reagent. First is the saline one. It is done for about 2 hours, and for another hour is the saline 2. So in the same day, we perform the impregnation. So it is where the clearing agent is removed and is replaced with a wax which fills the holes of the tissue. So the paraffin wax is first melted in the incubator for more or less 5 hours at 65 degrees Celsius. So when the wax melted, the tissue cassette is immersed for 2 hours as a first impregnation. So on the second impregnation, the tissue cassette is immersed for an hour. And the next process is the embedding. So in embedding, this is to prepare the tissue for trimming, and the paraffin wax is again melted, and as a molding material, a paper boat is used. So in paper boat making, you just have to prepare a paper. So as the wax melted, the wax is poured to a paper boat, and the tissue is then oriented. So when you poured a wax, the tissue is then followed. So prior to immersing of the forceps in the melted paraffin wax, it is first heated so that the paraffin wax will not stick in the forceps. So an ice tray is used to make the solidification of the paraffin wax faster. So after solidification, the sample is trimmed in order to remove the excess paraffin wax and to expose the tissue. The next process is section cutting with the use of a microtome. So in this procedure, we will be using a microtome. So first, we have the clearance angle, the mechanical device, the tissue block holder, the knife locker, the coarse wheel, the base lock, the breech, the base lock, the breech, the ratchet feed wheel lock, and the size adjustment. So after the section cutting, a ribbon is then formed, which is then placed in an incubator containing a water and is maintained in a 37 degrees Celsius. So an egg albumin is spread on the slide as an adhesive. A fish out process is done using a slide to get the ribbon. The slide blotted using a gauze is heated to remove the excess paraffin. So, the next process after that is the staining procedure. So, the staining procedure, it is where the application of dyes on the section in order to see this and study the architectural pattern of the tissue. So the first step is to immerse the slide in saline 1 for about 3 minutes and the saline 2 for 2 minutes. After that, you need to immerse it in a 100% of alcohol for 1 minute, 95% of alcohol for 1 minute, and 80% of alcohol for 1 minute. Hematoxylin is then followed for about 10 minutes and then dip it in tap water and 1% of acid alcohol and is dipped twice. Tap water is to be followed, and next is the ammonia water for 5 minutes, tap water, and the eosin Y for about 1 to 10 minutes, then tap water and 100% of alcohol for 1 minute, and 90% of alcohol for 1 minute, and 80% of alcohol for 1 minute. Then you all have to do is to go back to the saline 1 and saline 2. The only difference is that for the saline 1 and saline 2, instead of using 3 minutes, you will be using 1 minute. And the next is to proceed the tissue in a mounting procedure. So in the mounting procedure, we will be using the Canada balsam as a mounting medium. And after that, when you finish all the procedure in fixing the tissue, you need to label the tissue slide. So once you apply the mounting medium, you have to let the mounting medium stay for about an hour or until when it dries. So when you can observe that the mounting medium already dry, you need to undergo the slide for a microscopy.